The mask's impact on mental health. Topic. Today we are going to be talking about the effects of COVID and increased isolationism on American citizens and whether the mask mandate has led to a mental health decline. Question of interest. Is there an association between the decline of mental health of American citizens by looking at the percentages of alcohol use, drug use, the suicide rate per 100,000 people, and the depression rate in percentages in each state in the year 2020 regarding the different mask mandates in each of the states, and how strong is the said association? Design of the study. This is an observational study with a stratified sample of 2 or 3 groups, depending on the timing, and the chi-square test of association to see if there's a relationship between the mask mandate and the mental health decline in the year 2020 with the rise of COVID-19. The data. As seen, this data shows each of the 50 states and the data collected and what it is. For Section B, it shows you the alcohol use for each of the 50 states. For example, South Dakota is 22.60% of the adults in the population have abused alcohol. In Section C, it shows you the drug use. For example, in Georgia, 14.5% of adults have abused drugs. The suicide rate per 100,000 people is in Section D. So per 100,000 people in North Dakota, 19.6 people commit suicide. The depression rate in each of the states is shown in Section E. For example, Missouri, 80% of adults suffer from depression. In Section F, it's going to show you the mask requirements for each state. These are the no masks required, these are the masks required, and these are the masks sometimes required. Type of test and why. This is a chi-square test of association, and it is conducted to see if there is a relationship between the mask mandate and the increase of mental distress. If there is a relationship, further testing can be conducted to see if there is causation. How the test is conducted. This test is conducted using data collected and applied to the concepts of the chi-square test as seen on the next slide. This is the association for drug use. The null, which is saying there is no association between mental health decline / drug use and the mask mandate, versus the alternative, which is saying there is an association between mental health decline / drug use and the mask mandate, are what are being tested. You assume that the null is true. Knowing the alpha level, which is the level that the p-value is compared to, is 0.05, you can then test the conditions. The first condition is asking if the sample is random, which in this case is not needed to test because it's testing the entire population. The 10% rule, which is saying the sample is equal to or less than 10% of the population, which again, I don't need to test because I'm testing the entire population. Lastly, the lowest expected value is greater than or equal to 5. In this case, yes, 6.48 is greater than 5. The expected values are found by doing one section times another divided by the total. For example, for the first section, which is a low amount, and a mask is 11.52. To find the chi-square value, you do the observed value minus the expected value. For example, you would do 11 minus 11.52, square that, and then divide it by the expected value, which would be 11.52. In this case, the chi-squared value would be 0.01, and the p-value is 0.75. What is a p-value? In statistics, the p-value is the probability of obtaining results at least as extreme as the observed results of a statistical hypothesis test, assuming that the null hypothesis is correct. A smaller p-value means that there is stronger evidence in favor of the alternative hypothesis. In this case, if the p-value is below the alpha level, the level the p-value is compared to, which is 0.05, there is convincing evidence to say that there is an association between the mental health decline and the mask mandate. P-values and what they mean. The depression p-value, which is 0.75, means that we cannot reject the null that there is no association between the mental health decline/depression rate and the mask mandate. The suicide rate, which is 0.022293, means that we can reject the null that there is no association between the mental health decline and suicide rate and the mask mandate, which means you can test the alternative, which there is evidence to support. The drug use, which is 0.39008, means that we cannot reject the null that there is no association between the mental health decline/drug abuse and the mask mandate. Finally, the alcohol use, which is 0.90426, means we cannot reject the null that there is no association between the mental health decline and alcohol abuse and the mask mandate. Conclusions. There is an association between the mask mandate and the decline of mental health because the p-value of the suicide rate, which is 0.022293, is below the alpha level, which is 0.05, indicating some sort of association. So what? Basically, the evidence given shows that further testing is needed to see how much global unrest impacts the mental health of American citizens. If more is done to help prevent a total mental health decline, then society will have more preparations to stay mentally healthy in a time of major stress.